So this session is going to focus in on what we see developing in PowerShell in the areas of AI and machine learning. I think I'm going to have two Michael Greenes if I follow this. Maybe not. This might work. And so, yes, there's going to be a bunch of demos in this and a little bit of how-to, but we really wanted to make this a session that would encourage thinking and conversation. And so let's start with just our introduction, and then we'll get right into it. So I'm Michael Greene. I did not come this year to psconf.eu. I came in previous years, and what you see on the screen is what I can see on my screen, so I'm not able to see the audience list, but thank you all for attending today, and look forward to spending some time with you. And we'll spend about 30 minutes, I think, going through the presentation, but really looking forward to the time following the presentation to have a more interactive conversation. I'll hand it over to Stephen.
Oh yeah, and I'm Stephen Bucher. You may, if you attended psconf.eu this year, I was there, and I did the PowerShell Predictors session too. So that was kind of highlighting the stuff that we've worked on up until that point, as well as what's available right now for you guys with the predictors that we on the PowerShell team are working on and creating. This is a little bit of an addition to that session to give a little bit more insight into like where we're thinking with predictors, where we want to go with things, some other cool, fun things that we've kind of developed since the conference. And also, yeah, just kind of a general conversation of how we think predictors and AI and automation kind of fit into the whole ecosystem of your work and the work PowerShell does. So
very nice. The one thing I would add, from what we talked about so far, everything we're going to talk about in this slide is public. Nothing's like under NDA or super secret or anything like that. So you're welcome to talk about it, tweet about it, whatever you'd like. We're going to start off with a little bit of a discussion of why we think you should care, which is always helpful. And then we'll get into the details of what's available and a little bit of responsible AI, and then kind of where we where we know we're going and where we think it's going, that kind of stuff. So as a background, multiple times I would say, in Ask Me Anything settings, in conference settings, in discussions, over the past probably 5 to 10 years, people have asked the question, what does artificial intelligence mean for the world of scripting and automation? And we really want to bring this into focus as something that the whole community can think about. And, if we answered this question 5 years ago, the answer was, Poshbot, stuff like that, which is an amazing project. But, it's been things like, yeah, we really think PowerShell is a great language for automation. And to the extent that things like bots are developing, makes sense. We hope that they'll use PowerShell in their tooling. And we think it makes sense for provisioning them. We think it makes sense for bots to call PowerShell to perform tasks. And it should make that process a bit easier, we hope. And since then, and I would say especially in the last 2 or 3 years, this area has been evolving in really interesting ways. And I would say the number one thing that I've noticed, I don't know, it's been probably like 7 years ago, I think at the PowerShell meetup in Portland, I did a demo on what would the concept of a recommender look like for PowerShell, right? And it was just calling like a pre-built machine learning model that was meant for shopping cart applications. And I was just feeding it my history. And in the same way that, a shopping cart application, for some retail web service might say, oh, I see that you bought, shoes. Would you also be interested in socks? Right? That kind of thing. It was just doing the same thing, but looking at history and saying, oh, I see that you just ran this command. Well, every time that you've run it before, in these clusters, I'm seeing that you're also running this command next. So, here's a suggestion. Well, now all of that technology is like really kind of every day available. There's lots of different and far more sophisticated models that we can tap into. And we're really curious about like, what does this mean for automation? And so let's start just by looking at kind of like where this technology itself has come from and starting with prediction. And what does it mean to say, like, what are you going to type next? So where do we first see this? And I think this kind of makes it less scary, right? That's the reason I'm interested. There's a lot of different names for this: type ahead, text completion. If you think like Stephen and I were talking about this, the earliest we could come up with was the browser address bar, like using a web browser. And of course, it saved your history. And so if you went to msn.com and then you came back tomorrow and you started going to msn.com again, when you typed M, it might have come up and said, oh, msn.com, and you just hit enter and you went to the site. That was maybe the earliest we could think of. IntelliSense might actually have come first in common like web editing platforms, where it knew what functions were available and things like that, or what classes you had added. And so as you were typing, it might have tried to correct you. It might have proposed some functions. That was some really early notions of like type ahead. I was also thinking of word processors, where, really, really early in time, if you type something wrong, it would come up and say, you typed, it looks like you have a typo. I think you mean this word. And then they got a bit more sophisticated and starting including some grammar analysis. Like you forgot a comma, or you forgot to put a period at the end. And then one that I think we all probably find a little bit annoying and sometimes helpful is with text messaging. Like you're on your phone, you're typing a message to somebody, and it's like constantly trying to correct what you're typing. Hopefully the autocorrect doesn't change the word right before you hit send. Probably everybody here has experienced that and maybe got embarrassed and had to retype the message. We've all kind of seen that, right? That was the progression of like type ahead. And I'd like to hit pause. And Stephen, you're welcome to take the floor here since I can't see the chat. But if any of you think of other examples of where you have used something like a system that's supposed to be helping you type, where you have seen that, or one that had a good or bad experience, if you want to just put that in the chat, that would be really interesting to kind of start our conversation there. And Stephen, if there's nothing there, just let me know.
Yeah, we'll do. Well, I mean, I can think of one myself too.
Oh, great.
I know that in Microsoft Word, Microsoft Outlook, Gmail, in those platforms, yeah, CoPilot in the chat I see, like Word, Outlook, and Gmail are doing some of those auto-completion for your emails and for your documents. Today I was actually writing an email and I didn't write the subject line yet, but I wrote the body of it, and then I went back to the subject line to fill it out, and actually like it suggested exactly what I needed, which was kind of remarkable. I didn't know that was a feature until literally this morning. So
oh, wow.
It's becoming a lot more integrated into our lives without us really recognizing it or I guess subscribing to it or asking for it. It's just becoming more part of the ecosystem of text-based input in all sorts of different technologies. So
I think you nailed it right there. Like this wasn't something that people, like there was a survey and somebody said, what would make your life better? And they said, type for me, right? This is like a developing technology that seems to be showing up everywhere. So I think the really important part of the conversation is, what does that mean for PowerShell? Because, PowerShell certainly shouldn't be excluded from that innovation. So I looked at like, what are the, obviously Stephen just did a really great session at psconf.eu, and it was about predictors. And, hopefully these little GIFs come across okay in the stream. I'm going to leave them up for a minute. And I just want to think a little bit about what does it mean now that we've got this concept of predictors in the show? And you may have seen inline versus list view. This is list view. On the left, it's only working out of my command history. So I'm looking for the command get service winrm, and maybe, I'm not totally familiar with PowerShell. I'm trying to figure it out. Well, that's just coming from my history, so I would have had to run it before. But maybe that's like fairly common. Like I typed something 2 months ago. Now I don't remember what I did. It'll help me recover that information. So I don't have to use my human brain to bring that back to the surface. On the right, it's a little bit different. So that's coming from outside my machine. That's actually looking at information that's been discovered in examples throughout documentation and things like that for the AZ predictor. That's actually, in addition to seeing predictions from my own history, it's pulling these examples into my terminal. And, as I'm typing new dash AZ SER, it's like narrowing the search focus. And then, eventually it just provides a whole example. Oh, if you're going to go create a new service bus topic, here's a suggestion of parameters and things like that. And this concept of predictors, we really want to grow this area. We want to, actually get more sources and, think about how we can make this extensible. So we're really interested in feedback into how we can make predictors better. And I'll tell you why this is interesting, right? So for everybody here, you're probably, PowerShell experts, whether you consider yourself an expert or not. You're attending a PowerShell community event. So compared to probably some of your peers who have never even used PowerShell, I think you're probably more of an expert than you might realize. But for the people who've never used PowerShell, there's actually even people who are somewhat afraid of an interactive terminal. And so we're really trying to find out, how do we make the terminal experience more inclusive of people who aren't naturally going to go do it. And so we're going to look at a bunch of examples of that today. But this is one that I think is interesting because, especially with the one that's bringing in examples from documentation and things like that, they don't have to have that fear that I'm never going to be able to remember all the parameters, right? It's at least going to give you one working example. Now, this example might not be actually what you want to run, and you have to be smart enough to look at the example and make corrections as needed. And we're going to look a bit deeper at that as we go. I don't want to spend too much time on any one topic. So the other thing I want to look at is completers. And if you're thinking about this area and you're coming from sort of the background of somebody that likes to develop PowerShell scripts and modules that you go share with other people, completers is something that you might have dabbled in. The most sophisticated examples tend to have them. And then the ones that we just sort of wrote it quickly and then shared it often don't. So I want to drill in a little bit on what is a completer and why should we care. This is something that's 100% available today. This is not in preview. It's actually been in PowerShell for a long time. It's just a smart way that you can make parameters seem smart to the person who's running your commands, your functions or your scripts. And so I put both of these, since you can't obviously just click on my screen, I put both the link to the docs and this demo gist in the chat before our session started. But I wanted to look at this. So when you look at the completers docs, you're going to see, oh yeah, there's simple examples like, maybe you want, new dash picture and then, dash color, and you let them select from red, blue, and green, right? Something like that. That's just a list it's a thing that you put in, it's static, they pick from it. But in the docs, it also provides examples of how you can tell it when the user hits that parameter and then they hit tab to go run a script and get information, bring it back to that experience, and dynamically populate that list when the user hits tab. So obviously, I'm not expecting you to look at this. This is actually pretty much the whole gist that's in the tab. You can also go look at it on GitHub so that you can zoom in and scroll around, that kind of thing. The whole idea here is it has a function that defines something that's in the example that I renamed it as smart complete. And within that, it's just searching graph. It's just doing a graph search. So it's just searching Azure Resource Graph, and it's going to go look for the things that are of type subscriptions. And this is something we probably should do, but we don't have it locked into our planning process right now. But it seemed like a cool experiment. You may have felt this before, like you're managing a cloud environment, and you go to select the subscription that you want, and you have to know the GUID or the ID or the name of that subscription. And in this case, you've logged in, so it's just going to query out to Graph and say, hey, what subscriptions does Michael have access to? And then I just did a small proxy function that just adds to select-subscription, but for that subscription name, I have it run the completer function. In other words, go out, query, see what I have access to, bring that list back, Now offer those for tab completion, so I don't have to copy and paste into my terminal. And just to have a little bit of what that feels like, and then I'll take a break from talking for a second. On the left, it's kind of like, well, what's the experience without it? Well, PowerShell by default, if you don't provide it with a completer, it's just going to look at the local file system. So that's whenever, I hit subscription name and I hit tab, it's like, oh, here's folders that are available. Well, that doesn't make any sense for a subscription name. And on the right, it's just got that proxy function, and it's going to go get the name for me, so I don't have to remember it. And a lot of these things are about just not having to remember that. So Stephen, is there anything going on in the chat that people have had comments about this?
Well, someone says it's super cool, a very simple dynamic parameter, which is, I agree, I love this kind of, smart completers. Oh, another comment was kind of to your previous topic of the predictors with AZ Predictor, and what we have is like, it needs to be context aware into account. Otherwise you're just getting the get help dash examples.
Yeah.
And so if you create, service bus, save the variable SB, it should predict that use of that variable in the new command. And that's exactly what, AZ Predictor actually does today. It takes into account what variables have been created locally and can kind of autofill and be contextually aware. Oh, another question in the chat, does it also add the quotes, or is that a manual action?
Depends. So on the predictors, it was adding the quotes. On the completer example that I have here, I literally just hacked this thing together a couple months ago to see if it'd be even possible. And, it was like corresponding with our engineering team, and they were like, oh yeah, you're going to want to supplement this by having it add quotes. And I'm like, this is a sufficient proof of concept. So I just go in and manually add the quotes after it. Otherwise, those spaces are super problematic. I still use this actually a lot of times in my day-to-day because it's simpler, even having to go back and add the quotes. You'd think I would take the time to go fix this, but it hasn't been a priority. So
yeah,
very cool. I appreciate
cool. So,
the chat going. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, that's it from the chat.
Okay.
So do you want to just continue on the slides, and then I will share my screen once I do the demo.
Sounds good.
So so shifting gears a little bit to another kind of type of predictor that is available in the shell experience, and it's a different kind of predictor because it's the input is a little different. Previously, we've been talking about the you're typing what you typed previously, or you're typing, you kind of know along the lines of where you want to go. You want to get dash something, or you want to, type G and you see your previous command and as get or whatever. Codex is a different kind of approach. It takes natural language as the input and outputs gives you an output that is PowerShell or something that can run in PowerShell. And so if you go to the next slide here, so this was, you may have seen this already. This was actually highlighted quite heavily in Microsoft Build last spring. It's a really cool, Codex CLI, proof of concept. It works seamlessly with PowerShell. It's available today for experimentation. And it uses machine learning and examples from public sources. So it uses a similar kind of data set as you might see with GitHub CoPilot. Or these other kind of predictor services. The main difference of it from other predictors is, like I mentioned, the natural language sample of it. So I forget the next slide. Could you go to the next slide for a second? And then, yeah, so this is maybe what you have seen at Build. This is straight from the repo there. So you can type a comment, with the hashtag sign or the pound sign, and then type your question. It doesn't necessarily have to have a question mark or not, and then you can create a key binding that once you press that key binding, it gives you the results. So you can see this GIF going through, where's my AP, what's running on port this, and it's contextually aware to the previous stuff. So if you say stop it, it's going to know that you're talking about the whatever is running on the port 1018 that you just asked for. And so it can also, of course, give you more powerful things to create files, create a gig ignore, to add these mode modules to it, open it in Notepad, and it works like that. That's pretty cool. And so we've kind of utilized this, Steve Lee on the PowerShell team has created his own version of this that is the only difference is it's built in PowerShell. I forget exactly the previous what codex is built in by default, but if I will share my screen. Give me one moment here. Actually, could you go to the next slide just so we can have that up?
Sure.
So you can check this out and try it for yourself at aka.ms/pscodex-cli. It is necessary to have an OpenAI API key, and there's instructions on how to get that. But I will share my screen now and show off a little bit of what can be done. Technical difficulties. Hang on. Share screen. Okay, can folks see my screen? Do they see the PowerShell prompt? You can give, I think, like a thumbs up with like the number key 4 or something. Oh, yes. Okay, cool. Cool, thanks. So I have this here, and actually I'm using history predictors. I can use the same kind of get my IP, and it binds to specifically Control G. So when I run that, it creates the output from the natural language input, and so you can get that here.
And this is all writing on top of PS readline, correct?
Yes. So this is all writing on top of PS readline and getting that together. Also, if you're curious on what kind of this can do, you should send suggestions on what I should try in the chat, and I can give it a shot. Can't guarantee it's going to be the best thing, but I have a few examples. So some cool things we can do is like ask it, do I have any programs slowing down my computer? ? Do this here, and it will know to get the top 10 most CPU intensive processes. So you see, Edge, Teams, I have Discord there too. So we can do something like, oh, well, actually, I want to keep Discord from starting on startup. And if I run this now, it should remove it from my registry path, and so that's pretty cool. So I'm not going to run this because I'm actually on my Mac right now, so that won't work. But I can do other stuff like show me a list of prime numbers from 1 to 100. See what that does. Oh Lord. Okay, well, it's not perfect.
Actually, Ryan's got a good example here. Show me my stopped VMs in Azure.
Okay, that's a good one. Show me my stopped VMs in Azure. So it is a little, what is going on? No completions found. Okay, hang on. Give me a second.
Oh, weird. Oh. Have to exit your session and come back?
Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Give me one moment.
By the way, Ryan, one of the things I tried when I started playing around with this, I was just testing how many different ways to create a VM could it come up with. And so it was like Azure, check. AWS, yep. Google, yep. Hyper-V, yep. I think Zen worked, if I remember correctly. And then I was checking, I can't remember, I searched for a bunch of additional cloud environments, and it was reliably coming up with examples, even if they were multi-line. It was pretty good.
Yeah, so this was the result he gave me. I don't have my Azure account setup stuff correct, but that looks correct. Yes, I am a Mac. Oops, I'm sorry. But it can also do some other cool stuff. So like, what is the weather today in Seattle? Let's see what this gives me. Cool. So it gives me the weather in Seattle here in a nice GUI from the, it's really good with APIs and stuff like that. So what is the best module? Curious, actually, what is the best module? It's kind of like a ask, ask. Sort by version. Okay.
You could do
interesting. It gets that one because it's version 1, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. So it didn't understand best, really.
Yeah,
We could have
so well,
sorted
it
by
can do
download.
like stuff like get the top 10 issues from PowerShell GitHub repo with using Git off token. This is oh um I haven't set this token, but I'm just gonna see if it
Hmm.
yeah, actually run the right command there. Um, what are the next week lottery numbers? um,
I've never tried like a
okay.
vanity search. What do you know about Ryan Bartram? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, this is kind of cool. This looks fairly correct. I actually
Oh,
misspelled
wow, yeah.
issues, and so it found it to be users. Because I see, yeah, sort property by
So
contributors,
actually,
get the
this is
top
a
10.
this is
So
a great example. Remember all the times that you've tried, you might sit down and you think, I should really write a script to go get the list of issues. And then you come
yep,
across, oh, I'm going to have to deal with authentication tokens. And just that little stumbling block, it's like, I got to go look up how does GitHub handle their authentication tokens for their REST requirements. And I got to figure out the headers and that kind of stuff. So it just eliminates the spending time on dealing with that.
yeah. So I'll just run it with issues spelled correctly, and then I will property number. Okay, I don't know the exact properties, but that. Oh yeah, no issues. Okay, it changed the URI. Okay,
Cool.
that's pretty cool. So yeah, I will stop my screen. You didn't see anything. Nightly. Because I don't want to take up too much of the time. Let's see, stop share. There we go. So that's a little bit about Codex. Like I said, you can try it out for yourself if you want to get the API key via that URL, aka.ms/pscodexcli. It's really good with Git actually. So I would encourage folks to try that out. Maybe if we have time towards the end, we can play around with more suggestions. But yeah, so that's a little bit about PowerShell Codex. So Michael, you're
Very
welcome to
cool.
take away.
I will, we'll hit CoPilot, and then we actually have one thing to share that we'd like to get some feedback following up from today. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll wrap up maybe just a little bit over time. So CoPilot was actually mentioned in the beginning slides as examples where we're starting to see AI become integrated. So CoPilot is available from GitHub. It is a paid solution service. It plugs right into VS Code. There's a free trial, so you can go out and try it out. But it works great with PowerShell. And I'm going to warn you, it's a little creepy how good it is sometimes. So for all of these demos, I pre-recorded so that by now at this point in the presentation, you wouldn't have to wait for me to type them in. So I'll let this play a couple times. So the idea here, you can think about what Stephen was just showing, where you just type a comment, and then he was hitting, I think, Control G as a power chord, and then it was resolving. Well, when you're doing it in VS Code, it just automatically resolves as you get to the next blank line. So that's the first thing about CoPilot. The other thing to remember, you actually don't, like I'm doing this through comments, you actually don't have to. So if you have CoPilot turned on, as you're typing along, when you hit return, you'll notice it will start proposing what your next line might be. And like I said, sometimes it's kind of scary. So in this case, I told it in advance, this function, actually it's not a function, I just wanted the command to rename my computer. It told me to save the string as a variable, and then when I hit return, it gave me the actual function, right? Quick point about this, I really think for people who have a background that for any reason did not make them feel comfortable with scripting, this is a big advantage. Because like many of you may have been told to go write a document. So you go open Word and you stare at that blank page and it's a little terrifying. Where am I going to start? Right? Like I never even considered what the title of my document was going to be. And then, what are the 4 points that I want to make is kind of like in the back of my mind, but I didn't think about my introductory paragraph. Well, that same thing can happen to people who are opening a text editor or a terminal. So something like this where they can just sort of make a reference and then get some suggestions, I think might help bring people to try out PowerShell that have never tried it before. So here's another example. In this case, I'm just trying to save time from searching. So think about like some really complicated examples. And the one that I came up with, at first I told it like sides of a triangle. And it was like, I'm like trying to test it. And it's like, yeah, that's trivial. Here's Pythagorean theorem, go away. And I'm like, okay, cool. Angles in a triangle. And it's like, yeah. Cosine, tangent, whatever. And I'm like, all right, solve the quadratic equation. And it came up with the solution in my editor. I'm like, okay, I'm not really challenging it. So I'm like, all right, well, what if we wanted to find points along the parabola? So you can see in the beginning of the video there that I had actually typed, if I throw a ball 6 meters high at a rate of 15 meters per second, how long would it take to reach the ground? Well, it got it, obviously, right away. And I'm like, fine. And then I injected on Mars, right? Thinking I'm really going to get it this time. I'm throwing a ball on Mars. And it immediately comes up with the right code in PowerShell because the file extension in my editor was .ps1. And it actually auto-completed my comment statement by the time I was finished there. So, I came back and I hit return, I hit function. Well, the first thing you're going to need is go get gravity. And it put in the right values. And those are actually feet per second for Earth versus Mars. And then you'll see it's doing get dash time to fall. And if you look at line 22 there, it actually created an argument completer that we were talking about earlier. So it's like following best practices and getting a lot of stuff right. And then, I'm now running the command get time to fall, and I run the whole thing and it gets it, down to I don't know how many places. So this is just an example of like, if somebody told me, go write a PowerShell script that will figure out this scenario, I at least I'm going to spend an hour just getting on search engines and looking up the math and then what's the different gravity. You get the idea. And the fact that it just brought it to my machine. Now, it's probably not going to be perfect. I'm probably going to do a little editing. But think of the time it saved me on just creating the validate set, Earth, Mars, just all of those things. Setting the type for planets, making it. And I might have to remember, what is the exact syntax for doing a switch statement? It just put it all right there in my editor. So then I was having my one-on-one with Steve Lee after that, and he said, I wonder if CoPilot would write tests for us. I said, nah, that won't work. We're never going to have a job again, right? So sure enough, I went in and created an additional file, copilot demo.test.ps1, and I .sourced the script, and I just told it, I need pester tests for get gravity. And sure enough, it wrote my tests for me.
Michael, there was literally a question at the moment you started talking about tests, if you could write tests about CoPilot from Ryan there. So I hope that answers your question, Ryan.
I saw this and I about fell out of my chair. I thought, now we're really getting somewhere. Now, it was interesting. It's using Pester 4. So I had to go in and tell it, get rid of the dash in my should be's. And then when I ran it, I think this is an interesting point of the conversation, right? So I told it, invoke Pester, just run that specific script. And one of the tests failed. And it's because when it wrote the tests, right, and doing the unit test for get gravity, everything's fine. When you get to get time to fall, it expected, even though, it doesn't know that it wrote get time to fall. It expected that you would be rounding to the nearest tenth of a meter. So in that case, it was saying like meter and a half. But it didn't. It was giving it the full, whatever it is, 10 decimal string or integer. So that's a really good example for this demo because it means that it saved me a ton of time. I did not have to go out and write these tests myself. I basically stubbed them in using artificial intelligence. Then I made some small corrections because it wasn't going to work because I have Pester 5 loaded. It's using Pester 4 or earlier. And then when I ran it, it's on the should be, it's saying 1.5. I'm going to have to think about, okay, well, do I want to correct the function and make it round? Or do I want to correct the test and give it the correct value? And that is an important part of this conversation. You can't just blindly trust this, no matter how powerful it looks, right? So even though, this seems to be something that is going to, and especially if any of you, especially watching the recording maybe, are thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to automate me out of a job. I'm never going to be able to. Well, no, it's not. At least not right now, because this is a good example why. You're still going to have somebody who can look at the proposed text, make small corrections, maybe make big corrections, but just save time doing research, and then make sure that it works the way it's supposed to. And that is a super, super important part of what the industry is calling responsible AI, that we don't just take automatically generated code and put it into production, because that could be a big, big problem. Which brings me to my ethics slide. I'm going to keep up. I'm going to save some time here. So I already made the point. It's really important to review and understand the code that's created. There is a whole site underneath Microsoft.com around responsible AI. I also put this link in the chat. And sorry for putting en-us. That's my fault. I usually take those out and just let it resolve to your local language. But I really recommend going out and taking a look at this site, because there's a lot of good information about different machine learning models, how to use them responsibly. And I'll let you explore that on your own. So Stephen, one more thing before I hand back to Stephen. Damien on our team that works on Azure PowerShell actually did a really interesting deep dive. And he said, hey, I want to just check that the AZ predictor is not collecting anything about what I'm typing. And so he just ran Fiddler and he collected the network traffic. And even though he was putting in these property values, what resource group name, the name of the machine, the name of the storage account, where it's located, like what SKU it's using, when it sent, when the predictor was running its loop, and saying, this is what he's running, what do I predict? It was obfuscating anything that was considered private. And so we've actually tested this, and I just wanted to share, because naturally you should be questioning what information is this collecting about my environment. And we did a test on AZ PowerShell using the AZ predictor, and we were very happy with how that was working. So I think that was part of our requirements as it was being built, but we still wanted to validate and make sure. So we do have a topic we'd like to get feedback on as we move on to the discussion. And Stephen, do you want to get into this one?
Yeah. So we are still working with bringing predictors, the predictors that we've created in the shell experience to possibly other experiences. One such experience, of course, is VS Code. That's what we encourage folks to use for PowerShell script development, and what it seems predominantly folks use for script development. And we have brought the AZ predictor experience to VS Code, or at least an early prototype for it. Here's a screenshot for it. I would demo it, but it's still a little bit buggy, so I haven't been able to resolve the bug that I've been facing this morning. But you can see here, it is not just the typical IntelliSense that you'd see from VS Code, where it's just the next token or the next parameter or next commandlet. It is much more than that. It gives you the full commandlet parameter combinations with kind of dummy values, at least initially, until it gets more contextually aware. And to the points of it being talked about earlier, it is contextually aware, so it will be able to identify particular variables that may match the parameter name. We hope to train it more and develop it more so that it may know like particular sequences of commandlets that might be best recommended. That's still in progress, but currently the kind of contextually awareness goes particularly for the parameter values, putting those in so you don't always have to autofill things or like edit everything about the things being predicted to you. So we hope to release a preview. We released a short preview to MVPs earlier in the month, but found lots of bugs, and so we're fixing those bugs and hope to release another preview hopefully around Ignite time, so around October 12th to 15th. We're hoping for a new preview. You can sign up for it at aka.ms/azpredvscode. I can send that link again, but you'll just be signing up on your email, then you'll be notified later on your email once the preview is available to download. So we encourage you guys, if you want to give it a try, use VS Code and use AZ commandlets in your work to sign up, and look out for the kind of preview announcements. So it should be really good. It's been really fun playing around with it and seeing folks get feedback from it initially. So we want to continue down this space of encouraging predictors in different areas where PowerShell scripts are being written, and so this is just one of them. Yeah.
And this does not require a CoPilot subscription, correct?
This does not require a CoPilot subscription. This is completely free. This would be, it's using the same exact kind of model that the AZ Predictor currently uses in the AZ Predictor, az.tools.predictor commandlet. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so that's kind of it. Be sure to sign up and on that stuff, and I'll send the link in a moment here.
aka.ms/azpredbs code. Love it.
Yep.
So just to wrap up, and then we'll just open the floor to Q&A. So, people ask, okay, so what's PowerShell planning to do in the area of AI? And again, this is public information. I think our position on AI and machine learning is that PowerShell should continue to innovate along with this technology. So I don't know that the PowerShell engineering team will go spend time like building a specific AI model or creating an AI engine or solution of some time. I feel like all of those things are happening all around us. That's kind of where we started the conversation, is that this technology is maturing around all of us, and we're seeing it show up in every facet of technology. So I think PowerShell we, as an engineering team and as a community, should do our best to bring those capabilities into the scripting experience. Why? Because there's a lot of people who feel intimidated about scripting, whether it's automation or a terminal. For some reason or another, it just feels intimidating, and we want to be more inclusive of people from different backgrounds, from different like learning styles, different preferences for using different types of tools. And so I think to the extent that we can help people jumpstart, that's really important. I also think it's a whole new opportunity for training and things like that, because we're going to have to start thinking about, okay, well, you're not starting from an empty screen and getting to hello world. You're starting from an empty screen and getting a full code example. So how will you learn to be novice enough to know whether or not that example is giving you what you want, or if it might present some risk to your organization? So we want that comfort level to expand. We want to figure out a way to do that responsibly. And so I think it will make sense to continue to integrate with cloud tooling. I think that's a huge one, because the cloud environments are changing so rapidly. And there are a lot of really good experts that are, writing automation for cloud environments that can definitely use the jump starts, right? That can use like the examples being brought to the authoring environment or the terminal to help move faster. Because a lot of times, like, you figured out how the service works in the portal, and now you're moving to automate it. How do we take you from an empty terminal to having a working automation example as quickly as possible? And I think I'll wrap this up by saying I want this to be super well integrated into the PowerShell experience, but not just for PowerShell. Like if you run kubectl, or you run azcli, or you run SSH, right? Any command line tool should have an optimized experience that helps you figure out the complexities of that tooling when you're using it in a PowerShell terminal. And I think that's something we often have this conversation within our PM team about PowerShell as a scripting language versus PowerShell as a terminal experience. And I think on the terminal experience side, we can really have, you open your machine, you launch either iTerm or Windows Terminal, you get to PowerShell. Why is it better to run a non-PowerShell thing in a PowerShell terminal? I think this takes us there. And this gets us thinking about problems to solve. So I'm excited about that area of innovation. And that's it. Stephen, did you have anything you wanted to add? I will end my screen share here. Or anything cool from the discussion? Oh, Stephen, you're on mute. Sorry.
All right, I've been on mute. I just realized. Dang it. I always, yeah.
It'll be better the second time.
Yeah, anyway, so I was just saying I was answering questions in the chat. but if anyone has any additional questions or things they want, clarification on, things we may have brushed over and want some more topics on, please jump into the Q&A section, unmute, or post your questions in the chat. And yeah, thank you all for listening. I don't see anyone. I think people are waving, so yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Could be.
Thank you, everyone.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah. We'll be around, so feel free to grab us if you have any other questions.
Just trying these things out. It's like, oh, that just works. Hey, Nico, I see you're in the question area.
Yeah, am I correct that the OpenAI has a beta waiting list for code predictions?
I think it does.
Yeah,
I think
it does.
the testing, they only were. I think the service probably limits, kind of like different API keys for like GitHub will only allow so many queries per hour, things like that. I think they had the same problem, and that's why they had a wait list.
Okay.
Hopefully they will move that along.
It didn't take me a whole lot of time. I can't remember the exact time period, but I did get off the wait list. So that's why I was able to demo and show that stuff. So
yeah. Can you show that weather one again?
The weather one again? Sure.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. Let me share my screen.
Talk about something.
I did the lottery one. It just gave me 6 random numbers, unfortunately. So.
If they're correct, don't close your terminal.
Yeah. So here's like, what are tomorrow's lottery ticket numbers? It's just 6 random numbers between. So if I do, what is the weather today in Redmond, Washington? Do something like that. Oh, oops. Oh, because I sometimes wants the. Let me just try again. What is the?
Oh, that was weird.
I think sometimes it like autofills what even the input would. So like it threw in the question mark, expecting me to have it, but it was there with the question mark. Okay.
What? Oh.
Oh well, there it goes. Kind of. I don't. But yeah. This is just from the invoke web request from this endpoint here. It is, what's today? It's sunny today. It's going to warm up a little bit.
It would take me a minute to come up with getting those lines right.
Cool. Thanks.
Sure thing. Thanks for watching. What other fun ones are there?
I think it's safe to say that this is not a sentient AI, so you shouldn't feel guilty when you close your PowerShell window.
Yeah, let's see what this does. I probably misspelled because I'm horrible at spelling, but convert to Celsius, mandatory true, Fahrenheit. That looks correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know this is a European conference, so.
That's why I used meters in my example.
Cool.
Great. Well, we can sign off, and maybe we'll just hang out around the gather show floor then.
Can it DSC?
I don't know.
What's something I can write? I'm not familiar with DSC too much.
Just like you could say a PowerShell DSC configuration that makes sure the WinRM service is running some version of that text.
All right, let's see what it does.
Yeah, that's right. It actually makes sure that WinRM for IIS is installed first, which you wouldn't need, but the second part of that is right.
Can I create me a file with DSC? Let's see what this does.
When you say create me, you might have just had an inception in the universe. It worked. Well, hello world.
I'm still crazy.
I'm
still
that's really close to the example for that resource that's in the docs and in GitHub. So that's probably where that came from. Shut it down. It's taking over the
Shut it down. It's sentient. Yeah. Kill it.
Yeah.
No.
Is this fun? Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's
it fell off.
it fell off.
Good.
But anyways, it's pretty cool. So become Skynet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't tell it that.
Or you are overlord.
Yep. Cool. But yeah, so that's kind of a smorgasbord of predictor stuff.
Very cool.
Pretty cool stuff.
Well, thank you everybody for attending, and we'll hope to talk to you more.